What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Tony, the new biopic film from Matt Johnson, starring Dominic Sessa as a young Anthony Bourdain. Following the very well-regarded Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie, Matt Johnson, Canadian director, gave us Blackberry a few years back, so he has done a biopic of sorts already. And of course, this marks a very notable star turn for Dominic Sessa, who of course burst out with a big breakout performance a few years back in The Holdovers. Nice role for what it was, and Now You See Me 3 last year. But this is a really big look for him because, of course, he's portraying a beloved icon in the late Anthony Bourdain. Johnson's Tony is a very satisfying biopic film portraying a famous figure, in this case Anthony Bourdain. Rather than try and capture the subject's entire life, we were focused on just a key part of their life. In this case, Bourdain's summer trip to Provincetown in 1975, where he first works in a kitchen. And what you get is a great Dominic Sessa performance that isn't trying to openly ape and mimic the adult Bourdain that became so famous and so beloved in life. Instead, what you get is a familiar coming-of-age story. Young Tony is an insolent, overconfident brat who has no accomplishments but thinks he can do anything, constantly deceiving and lying to everyone around him. Sessa really nails this type of performance. I thought he was really good in this movie, wearing that longing, really being detestable at times before he started to learn a thing or two about how to work with other people and inadvertently find the passion that would dictate the rest of his life. The film has two excellent supporting performances. Antonio Banderas as the unnamed chef who Tony goes to work for in Provincetown, and also Leo Woodall, also someone working in the kitchen, who portrays this rakish rogue who takes Sessa under his wing and teaches him a thing or two that he hadn't picked up yet in college. The movie isn't groundbreaking in terms of its structure or its screenplay. It does feature a pretty thinly written female character portrayed by Emilia Jones, who's very little beyond being the love interest in the story. I do think there's satisfying character work here. And when you're making a movie about someone who was so beloved but also has tragically passed away young, in the case of Anthony Bourdain, doing this kind of story where you focus on the young man before the legend was written, I think was a pretty smart choice. I think right away the movie does a good job of establishing Tony as kind of the serial liar, someone who really thinks his shit doesn't stink and will just peddle that as far as he possibly can, even though he has no actual accomplishments. He doesn't really know much about anything. He just thinks he does. Of course, lying about this writing fellowship that he gets passed over for in the beginning of the movie, using this as this pretext to go off to Provincetown, really just to chase Emilia Jones's Nancy, who does in fact become Bourdain's wife later in life, of course, really because he has nothing else to do. Skipping out on his parents, crashing out in his first night there, and kind of lucking into working in this restaurant for that unnamed chef played by Banderas, and sleeping on the chef's back hammock, really struggling for a while before he starts to pick up the rhythms and rigor and the culture and the camaraderie that is working in a small kitchen, such as this restaurant, The Flagship. I think the movie does a decent job of communicating all of that cultural stuff there. The comedian Stavros Halkias is also here as one of the fellow workers in the kitchen. I think it's a pretty fun, supporting performance from him. The stuff between Tony and the chef, I think, is where the movie really, really shines the most, as the chef feels an inclination to take Tony under his wing and, teach him a thing or two and kind of show him the way. And none of it's like that linear, honestly, in terms of like the realizations of the characters. But I think I appreciate the warmth you get there. I think Banderas does a lot to really make that character pop in a good way. And I've really, again, enjoyed that contrast alongside Leo Woodall's Sal, just because Sal, is going out there and drinking and smoking every night, doing cocaine in the kitchen, trying to have as much sex as humanly possible. Literally, we see visual proof of just how many people he's slept with over the summer. I think it's a pretty effective, counterpoint to Tony, because Tony doesn't have any experience, which also means is for the most part still a pretty innocent, well-intentioned guy, even if he's been a complete, dunce throughout most of the movie. But when some more bad, violent things happen, some really strong and deliberate drug abuse is shown, obviously nodding to Bourdain's future, where he does openly admit to struggling with substance abuse. That's not the focus of this movie, but it's like a clear reference point. The thing the movie does a good job of making Provincetown in 1975 feel like a real place. Obviously, I'm someone who's only visited Provincetown during more modern times, so I can't really speak to the cultural differences that the movie suggests, right? There was a camaraderie, there was a community that the chef references as even changing by then, even a product of bygone era by then. But, the clam bake, I like the way that came around. Tony feeling inspiration to have the flagship introduce a Friday special and it being this kind of more elaborate lobster dish. And that kind of going really well and occupying effectively a set piece in the movie, and then having disaster strike and Tony being partially responsible for that. Again, a lot of this is not like total fact, but the basis of this movie is key reference points in the early chapters of Bourdain's, breakout novel, Kitchen Confidential, of course. So I think it's a really fun, like, coming of age biopic. I think this is kind of the best possible scenario you can get, where as long as you're going to make something that's still pretty traditional, I think this is about as good as you can do when you have great performances throughout. I think Emilia Jones is really good in this movie. Just her character, Nancy, has very little to do beyond reacting to Tony's lies and learning about them eventually throughout the movie. But I think Emilia Jones has really started to impress me. Obviously breaking out in Coda, which won Best Picture a few years back, but between the performance in HBO's Task last year and then this, and the spectrum that those two performances are on, how far apart they are, I think she's really talented, and I'm looking forward to seeing her in more and more stuff. And again, this is a great use of Dominic Sessa. I think this will get him even more attention. And Leo Woodall also, he was in Tuna earlier this year, which was critically loved out of the festivals. And now you have, I think, a really excellent supporting performance from him here with this. He's a guy as well. And even Dagmira Dogmanic and Rich Sommer as Anthony Bourdain's parents, who are briefly in the movie, make a strong enough impression as well. Let me know, though, where you at with Tony from A24? It's an August release. I don't think it's really being thought of as a true awards contender, given the kind of early release here before awards season. But hopefully the movie can perform decently well for A24. I'm curious to what degree that will happen, given Bourdain did have plenty of popularity due to his television career with Parts Unknown and No Reservations and whatnot. I'm curious to what degree a young Anthony Bourdain movie will bring people out to the box office. We'll find out. Let me know where you're at with the movie, and for more film reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.